This speaker will be talking to us on burnout, which he knows a lot about because he's been alive for 300 years. In that time, he's had lots of deep, long-lasting friendships, but none as close as he's had with Mary Ann, his immortal 20-foot-tall bison. Together, they've explored and roamed the western United States, raising barns, rescuing children from wells, and saving small towns from the brink of extinction. But now those small towns have become cities, and this speaker grows weary with the stench of man. And so he has found it time to wander off into the mountains, or perhaps build a boat and go onto a far-off island to get away from civilization. He grows weary. But first, he's going to give a talk. So may I introduce Ken Mugrage.
That was awesome. They told us if you don't give her a bio, she's just going to make something up. I'm like, I'm going that way. That's like done. So cool. I'm going to finish up today on a fairly sensitive topic. I'm going to talk a little bit about burnout. Now, you may have seen a lot of talks about this lately, which is a phenomenally good thing. That's the point, frankly. This one's a little bit different. I'm going to talk about what some of the causes are, but I'm also going to try to bring it back to DevOps days. How can a DevOps culture help or hurt? So we'll get into that a little bit. So a different bio. That one was more accurate, but this one's the one I usually use. A little bit about my background. It's kind of funny. I almost never put the military service up there, only because I got out 3 decades ago. But I do for this talk because, it speaks to something that is a little bit different. I mean, when I was in the Marines, there was no such thing as burnout and stuff. Suck it up, sunshine, get up the hill. So, if I can change, then anybody can change. Now, the other thing that's kind of funny is that when you talk about stuff, like I do a lot of talks about continuous delivery and DevOps, and I have for years, and Agile before that. You're supposed to come up here and be like, this is it because I said so. Believe me or perish. But this is a little bit different kind of subject. It's a medical subject. You may have noticed, as a matter of fact, on my bio there, I'm not a mental health professional. And so, take this with a grain of salt. This is, a couple decades of experience. I've been very clinically burnt out. I've been in cases where people thought I should be, but I wasn't. Friends and so forth. So take it with a grain of salt. Other disclaimers. DevOps could make this worse. I have heard people say, oh, we're going to do DevOps now. We can fire half the staff. We just teach them to do a little ops and we, whatever. So, DevOps is a culture change, and it's important that culture change be the culture you're looking for, not the culture that somebody reads it to be. The next disclaimer, confirmation bias. So I am convinced that this is true, but I was convinced before I started doing the research. And so, everybody's familiar with this. You have preconceived notions, so I want to put that in there. And then, like I said, lots of disclaimers. My favorite one, I try to work a causation versus correlation to every talk I do somehow. Again, we've seen this. I think some of this will probably resonate with some folks here. It has when I've talked about this in the past. But again, I don't have any science. I can't prove it, and I want to be upfront about that. Okay, so if that's the case, then why am I doing this? I'm doing this talk to try to get you to do this talk. Okay, which is the same thing that a good friend of mine, John Willis, told me about a year ago. He was doing this, and I'm like, John, can I do that? He goes, that's the point. Let's get people talking about this stuff. And so also, why not me? But then that brings up the case, why not you? So, we always try to get success criteria. Hey, what do you consider a success or what have you? To me, a success is if I hear a story where, one person from this audience went back and reevaluated something or talked to their team or made some improvement and then talked about it some more, that's awesome. Okay, so if I'm going to talk about burnout and DevOps, I have to define the things. So, what is burnout? This is the dictionary definition. I have to imagine it's fairly accurate. Merriam-Webster is pretty good about that stuff. That said, we've been doing at ThoughtWorks and some other folks I know, we've been doing a lot of research on this. And if you ask 10 psychologists to define burnout, you're going to get at least 10 answers. It's a little bit like asking somebody to define DevOps, which I'll do too in a moment. For all the materials out there, this is the one that I found, and I found it through John, that is my favorite. They put years of research in. They actually found things accidentally. So there's 3 specific things that they know they can measure, and they've done some peer-reviewed research. We can measure exhaustion, cynicism, and something that they call professional efficacy, and I had to practice saying that word. Exhaustion, that's the one we think of when we heard about burnout. I'm just tired all the time. This is not, I was forced to do 20 hours of gardening over the weekend because we have a party exhaustion. This is a little bit different. This is that, to the core mental fatigue and so forth. Same with cynicism, but this I don't just mean the standard, all politicians lie. I mean, we're all cynical in some ways. Of course, that's actually truth. But, this is, I just don't care. It's like, oh, if we do this DevOps thing, we're going to make it better. I don't care. So that's a big one. The one that surprised me the most is professional efficacy. And this is one where I think you'll see, I think, in the future where we can have some effect. This is just your feeling of competence. Do I feel like I'm doing a good job? Do I feel like I'm contributing? Am I doing the right thing? What have you. This is why I hate multitasking. If you never finish anything, you never feel finished. So forth. Why should we address burnout? So sometimes you have to make a business case for things, but I don't think you should have to. This is a mental health issue. There's people that are suffering. We talk about it because we can. That said, there are business reasons. So this is a graphic stolen out of Google Rework. They did a big survey last, I think, November, something like that, looking at the keys to their successful teams, their highest performing teams. What do they have in common, if anything? And the number one thing, not at all surprisingly to most people, was psychological safety. People felt okay to fail. And I don't want to make failure, failure is kind of the new black. But if you feel okay to fail, you can take risks, you can try things, et cetera, and you're actually a more effective team. And part of psychological safety, you'll see, is some of these causes of burnout in the future that will cause it. Also, it's not going to be a surprise to anybody that if you're really suffering from these things, if you're not engaged with your job, you're not going to do a good job. And so our work will be better if we feel better. I mean, that's, again, seems obvious. Now, I warned you, the world needs yet another definition of DevOps, so I came up with one. The reason I did this is because, so I believe that DevOps is a culture and continuous delivery and those kind of practices are what you do. That's the technology, kind of Agile and XP, et cetera. And so I really want to focus on culture, but the reason I felt like it was important to bring this into this talk is that some of what I'm going to talk about does assume continuous delivery. So during this talk. So if you want more definitions about that, I'll be around all day tomorrow too. Okay, so the other thing the book got into is some of the causes of burnout. And this is where I thought was pretty interesting. So it turns out that it's not necessarily a thing. It's not about the amount of work. It's about the amount of work not being right for you personally. So, the key word in there, and again, quoted from that book, is this concept of a mismatch. And what they were able to do is come down with 6 areas where this is really key. So the 6 common areas of mismatch. Everybody here, I think, probably can read. I'm going to go through them more in a second, but I'm not going to read them to you. So what they found is that in these different areas, and I'll get into definitions here in a second, that if you have a mismatch between your needs, desires, and your company's needs, desires, on these topics, this is what causes burnout, clinical burnout. I believe that the areas that are now getting bigger are the areas where a DevOps culture can have the greatest effect. And I'll go into why I think that's true. So first off, from a work overload thing. So, this isn't getting a lot bigger. Work overload's not necessarily going to be helped by DevOps. In fact, in a lot of cases, it can be hurt. But it could, work is more visible, so I know it's coming, so I can schedule better, supposedly, again, pretty light here. I hope there's more load sharing in a true DevOps culture. Dev is having pagers, however you want to put it. But there's more visibility of what's going on and more sharing of things. So the continuous delivery thing, less deploy marathons. If I never ever hear again about somebody coming in at 5 or 6 or 8 on a Friday and staying all weekend, I'll be a very happy person. But again, I want to caution you that culture change. Some see this as just a cost savings way. And I'll get a little controversial because I like doing this. If you tell me you're a full stack engineer, I'm going to hand you some JavaScript, and then I'm going to ask you to tune a kernel. And so some people, oh, DevOps, now we got one person, they do everything. No, it's about a team coming together, and I'll get more of that in the future. But again, I want to stress it's about a mismatch on these things. So this, actually, I updated this not before this trip, but the last 3 years I've flown 390,425 miles. A lot of people would be like, oh my God, are you kidding me? They'd be crazy. You're nuts. I love my job. This doesn't burn me out at all. It's fine. That might not be the same case for you. And yes, I know East Asia is blank, so I'm going to Singapore in October. So the next one, a lack of control. This is one where I really do think a DevOps culture can help. In a proper culture, teams are ultimately responsible for the decisions, all of the decisions. Using the right technology and tools for the team. I'm a strong believer in self-organizing teams. Now, I'm not saying if you're in large enterprise that means you need to use every programming language ever invented. But there are cases where people might need to go from the standards. This does not mean DevOps team. This is another one that makes me cry a little every time I hear it. You don't want a team defining the things for other people. That doesn't give them any more control, right? So lack of control is a personal thing. You have to feel like you have some control over your own destiny. So the next one down is insufficient reward. I include it because I wanted to include all 6. DevOps has nothing to do with this. It certainly won't hurt. But that said, there is massive amounts of research that says once you get to a certain level, I'm not saying we don't want a house on the beach and a BMW and whatever. But once you get to a certain point, more money has almost no effect on your productivity, your happiness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's tons of reviews. There's a bunch on that Harvard Business Review, and the slides will be posted later. So nothing to do with DevOps culture. Yeah, woo! Got to do the Star Trek thing. I'm sorry. It's I was alive when the first series came out, so barely, but I was. I work for a company that doesn't pay commissions or bonuses, or there's no stock options. We're never going public, whatever. But I did the .com thing, and I had the house on the beach. I worked for VA Linux, still holds the record of the single largest IPO in history. I was miserable. Now I'm not. So breakdown of communications. This is a huge one where we can do this. Everyone who's ever been through an Agile 101 training or CD 101 training has seen something that looks like this, where we have people that are writing the code, and they might be doing, Agile processes, nice iterative development, and XP, and test-driven, and da-da-da-da. And when they're done, they throw it over the wall, et cetera, et cetera. Not a whole lot of communication going on there. And so this is kind of what I meant by this assumes continuous delivery, et cetera, is because, if you form those teams, call them what you want. If those are still separate teams in your organization, you still don't have the communication you need. And so the DevOps culture can really help that. What I say is that everyone within the product is on the same team. There's just caveats. Things change. But I was having a conversation earlier with somebody who was a system administration background, and I'm sorry if you're here and I'm quoting you and I shouldn't. But we were talking about getting things thrown over the wall and that lack of control and et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, man, you should be pairing with the developer and saying, hey, if we develop it in that way, it's going to be really hard to maintain. It's going to be really hard to secure. It's going to be really hard to whatever. And you might, as a system administrator, I admit, I'm using old terms, you might say, okay, that doesn't make any sense, and then they're, okay, but the product owner's there too, and they say, hey, we're doing that because, and there's a business reason behind it, and again, opening up that communication, but actually working with people. And I really do mean everyone's on the same team. Our product marketers are on our product teams. They go to the stand-ups with everybody. It's one stand-up. I've never done swarming. I've heard really cool things about it. But again, the idea is to get all the right skills there, not the right team or what have you. But then everybody's in control. Everybody knows what's going on, and it's not all the weight on somebody. By the way, if you haven't read the Phoenix Project yet, I don't know if Gene's still here, but if you haven't read it yet, do. It's required reading. Everybody should be able to tell at least 3 stories about Brent because you know him. It was funny. I was at a DevOps road trip the last week, and a guy who I respect a lot when it comes to things that are retrospective, J. Paul Reed, he was saying that he doesn't like the term blameless. It's fine. I hate the term postmortem. So we're just going to agree to disagree. But the idea here is that we're not, it's your fault, you're bad, you're a bad person. We assume people made the best decision they could at the time with the information and resources available to them. And I know I screwed up that quote, but that's the basic idea. And again, sorry. I was lucky enough that when I started at ThoughtWorks is when Jez Humble and Dave Farley were writing the book called Continuous Delivery. And Jez used to love to say this. Creating a new silo is not a solution for silos. So the next one down is absence of fairness. Everyone's got to put that. How many times have you seen that today? This first one? Oh, wow. Cool. So I love this image, but I also hate this image because it's true. I mean, how many times did we, oh, we're done, we're going to go to release party, woohoo! Oh, they're up all weekend and it doesn't work and they're getting paged at 3 a.m. Yeah, it's not okay, so I don't like it. And I have to try to get that animation once into everything. Werner Vogels, is it Werner or Werner? Anyway, from Amazon said, you build it, you run it. I'm a strong believer in that. It's fair. Everybody's working together and working. Everybody is responsible for quality and everything quality means. Quality means uptime. Quality means secure. Quality means usable, etc. Everyone is measured the same way. So I talk to a lot of organizations from 10 people to 100,000 people. And you hear about all the times where, we're measuring on uptime. If I meet these uptime goals, I get my bonus. And the best way to never have a system go down is to never change it. And so they're getting bonused on that, and yet other people are getting paid on something else. And so I don't care what the measurement is, except for that if it's lines of code, I'll hunt you down. But mostly I don't care what the measurement is, but you have to be measuring everybody the same way. Success is success. And there's nothing wrong with having a release party. Okay? I mean, continuous delivery means that we publish the thing when we say as a business it's ready to be published. That might be once a month, might be once every 2 months. It might be a milestone. Get some grog. Is that the local thing I heard about today? Have a release party, but everybody goes. Don't ever forget on anything that metrics drive behaviors. If I do start measuring people on lines of code, it's going to get real long, real quick. Okay, so remember that when you're doing that. Just like commissions cause some people to misbehave, whatever you measure on can do it. Okay, the other really big cause of burnout that I've seen this one I've actually seen a lot firsthand, is conflicting values. And by values here, I mean values in the broadest possible context. And so I promise it's not a pitch, but I am going to talk to you a little bit. So ThoughtWorks has the thing we call Pillar 3. We want to advocate passionately for social and economic justice. We do a lot of not-for-profit work. We do a lot of, we call it Pillar 3 work, whatever you want to call it. If we do a lot of diversity work, etc. If you are pitching against something that we are not, you're going to be miserable at ThoughtWorks. If you're a person that wants to work and you want stock options and you want to make, hey, I did it, no problem. you're going to be miserable, okay? So values is not just the values of what's coming out of an organization. Values is the personal values. If you don't like the military and you're working on missiles, you're going to be miserable. Okay, so conflicting values. That said, again, it's all about you. It's what's different for you versus the things that are going on. Okay, so some things that you can do. Time check real quick. First off, pay attention to how you feel. I mean, frankly, this is a big part of it. Oh, I'm not burnt out, I'm fine. You might not be. Okay, just pay attention. There is a thing that you can do. The author of that book did a thing called LOC Burnout Inventory. As I mentioned, there are 3 things they can measure on: the exhaustion, cynicism, and efficacy. You can go take a test. It's one of those, rate this 1 to 5, et cetera. And it will come out and show you where you are versus the population in general. And you can kind of get an idea, and it might open some eyes for you. So actually, I put myself in my mindset of a role that I had 5 or 6 years ago, and I took it, and I tried to remember how I was feeling. And this is what I came up with. So, the top 2, lower on the left is good, on the bottom one, far on the right is good. So I was in a sales engineer position. I had no interaction with the development teams. I had no interaction with what was getting built. I could go out there and do continuous delivery workshops and whatever else, but I really didn't feel like I was accomplishing anything. I didn't feel like I was getting anything done. And so I was totally burnt out. I mean, people were really, I had friends that were worried about me. And it's not easy for me to get up here and admit that. But that said, when it really got down to it, it wasn't about the number of hours. I wasn't working ridiculous hours. It was about I didn't feel like I was accomplishing anything. So if you want to take this inventory, it might open some eyes to you. John Willis did a talk. He does a burnout talk that has a lot in common with this one. He talks about his story on this. It's really kind of interesting. On the other one, especially as it relates to the efficacy, is increase your own self-awareness. So, we all get comments from people all the time. As people that do a lot of public speaking, we'll hear things. There's the Twitter sphere, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what's the one that everyone's always going to remember? So again, it's a self-awareness thing. If you're aware of this and hey, quit focusing on that. There was a lot of good that was said too. Get rid of that. Make it go away. And focus on the good stuff. And I know that's very touchy-feely and easier said than done, but please. The other thing you can do is you can talk to someone. Now, I really want to stress here, professional help is the best. They're really trained to identify cause and effect. So we hear all the time, in fact, I heard a story last week, where in this case it was fine for this person, but I was so burnt out or whatever, they made me take a couple weeks vacation. What if that person was feeling that way because they didn't feel like they were being effective? What if they didn't feel like they were contributing, they weren't making a difference, and what you told them is, yeah, we don't even need you here, go away for 2 weeks. Okay, so, think about it. Don't try to guess at cause and effect. Professionals can recommend treatment. Clinical burnout is a medical issue. Okay, sometimes it's chemical treatments. I mean, let's be honest. Sometimes it's psychotherapy. Sometimes it's quit your job. Sometimes it's just, oh, okay, I didn't realize that was bothering me. But professionals can help you with there. And for God's sake, if we went skiing and we fell down and we broke our arm, we wouldn't be embarrassed to go to the hospital. I mean, we just wouldn't. So don't be embarrassed to talk to people, please. Nothing wrong with friends and family. There's a lot of people that you care that haven't even met. DevOps in a large part is about empathy. If you don't know me and you want to dump, feel free, anytime. Follow me on Twitter, I'll follow you back, DM me, whatever. There's people out there that absolutely will listen. You should be one of those people if you can. But again, remember, empathy is great, but you're not a professional. So if you do come to me and say, yeah, gosh, I really need thinking about this. I'm going to try to be as empathetic as I can, and I'm not going to be helpful at all. I mean, as far as advice, okay? Because I don't know. I just don't. So don't try. And please don't recommend a treatment. Unless you do this. So I found this organization. I signed up for a class. I haven't taken it yet. mentalhealthfirstaid.org. So, we teach first aid. We teach people how to bandage a bleeding wound, and, et cetera, et cetera. There's this organization that teaches people to be mental health first responders, how to notice things, not only burnout, but other things that might be going on. You can get people on your teams, people in your organizations trained for this, and they can see what's going on. If there's a person in your organization that's trained for it and you see something, you could go to that person maybe privately and say, hey, I was talking to this other team member, and I don't know, so there's people out there that get the training, and you can get the training here. Some further reading. So at the top, the first one up there, and again, these will be published if you don't want to snap a photo or whatever. There's a blog that John Willis wrote, 18 months ago, a couple of years ago, something like that. It's not a happy story, but it's what kicked off a lot of the discussions around here. There's a lot of good TED Talks out there. Mind Garden is the company that does the LOC Burnout Inventory. It's Christina and others, actually Dr. Masloch, sorry, and others, their company. Human Ops, something that Jason turned me on to, that's really cool. It's a bunch of organizations, people getting together, just trying to say, hey, as humans, let's take care of each other, et cetera. I don't want to go into too much detail because I have to admit I haven't done a lot of research. A couple references there. And I do want to call it thanks. Again, John was very helpful. Jeff Sisson is the one that really kind of held my feet to the fire and say, hey, this could hurt as much as it helps. Jen Karashi, who's hiding out here somewhere, is the one that did most of the research that I'm now taking credit for. And frankly, a whole lot of others. So other than diagnosing you, if we have time, I'm glad to answer questions.
So how do you recommend getting past a fear of failure? Because fearing failure is a huge burnout.
Yes.
Of, just a reason for burnout in and of itself. Are there recommendations that you have that could help with cultures of failure or fearing to fail within the DevOps community?
Boy, that's an interesting question. Well, first off, I'd say try to do it faster. So, yeah, the more something hurts, the more you should bring it forward. So there's a concept in continuous delivery called fail fast. I'm going to go around this in a sideways thing. So we have a product. We did a fork of another thing. We're going to make a product out of it. We spent 6 months on it. It didn't work. Everybody was miserable, et cetera, et cetera. We knew it early on, but everybody was afraid to call it. Everybody was afraid to say, this isn't going to work, and here's why. And it goes back to that psychological safety that came out in rework, is if you have a team that has those things, you can do that. Now, how can you get those things? There's a thing I really like that I've only exposed to in the last couple of years called a safety check. There's a blog on it. I'll find the URL if you want to find me later, or you can Google for it. It's pretty easy. But the idea is that you're having a meeting, you're having to get together, or even just on a regular basis, that people rate how safe they feel, like on 1 to 5, completely anonymously. If it's in a meeting, it's on a kind of blank thing, and then somebody creates a histogram and just gets a feel for where the team is. And then, hey, okay, let's talk about this. What can we do to make sharing better? What can we do to make people feel safer? Do we need to get some mental health first aid? Whatever those things are. But you have to have an environment that, I used to say invites failure, but there's been a lot of writing lately about failure is the new success in Silicon Valley, and I don't want to encourage it. That said, if it is safe to do it, if you're safe to experiment and have it not work, then that fear hopefully is less. Usually when it's the fear of failure, it's not the fear of failure, it's the fear of other people's responses to the failure. And so it's really about the community, and I know that's not at all helpful. But
So I guess it was just one, not really a question, but more of a point to say also, it also behooves you as a person to recognize the burnout and your cynicism, because if you are very cynical, you're going to drag the rest of your team down. And you're going to, if you're in that situation, you're actually making it worse for everybody else. So you also have to look at it as a responsibility on yourself to recognize that and take action.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I'll be honest, part of what made me kind of recognize this as an issue a few years ago is I was being introduced to another team at our company by the boss, and for the people here that I work with, this better not get back to him. Anyway, he says, okay, so everybody thinks I'm the grumpiest person in the company. You haven't met Ken. Here he is. And I was like, okay, he was joking, So yeah, very good point.
On one hand, I sense the responsibility is on you. It's all about you. Recognize yourself, which is a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I also hear you're not a professional. Don't try to diagnose someone else. But isn't this, I feel like there's an opportunity to work on this as like a team or as a culture. And I feel like it's very binary. Like, it's all about you. Don't diagnose anyone else. But like, is there a responsibility for a team or like an organization or at some director level or something? Like, is there more to this?
I think there probably is, and that's where some of that training, like the mental health first aid and stuff, comes in. Now, I do have to say, like, you know, if I'm up here talking about continuous delivery, I'm going to say feature branches are bad always. If I'm up here talking about burnout, I'm going to say diagnosing other people is bad always. Off the stage, it gets a little softer. You're right. It's very, very gray. But, you know, in this particular case, when we're talking about any medical issue, the result of somebody taking action that isn't, you know, clinical burnout is often misrepresented or misdiagnosed, and it was like clinical depression. And people, you know, take actions based on well-meaning advice of other people and make tragic decisions. And so that's why I guard. So you're right. It's very black and white and it makes it very hard. But that's why at the end I also say, you know, there is training. And absolutely in your organization, somebody should be trained to recognizing some of this stuff.
I just wanted to throw an answer over here to
Awesome.
the question about avoiding fear, because thank you for asking that question, and it reminded me of an answer to it that I kind of needed today. And I heard Adam Savage from Mythbusters once talking about his experience with meditation. And he says that one of the things that we feel a lot in our days and a lot of our anxiety is the fight or flight response. And one of the things that he learned learning meditation was to remember you're not in actual physical danger. Just breathe in, breathe out, and go, that's not a lion. There's not a truck going to run me over. These are people, and they may be mad in an office. It's fine.
Yeah, so how do we balance the personal and the professional life? I think that is one of the important cause for the burnout. That's what I feel, but I don't see, like, you know, people are working 18 hours, whatever, but they're not balancing the personal life. So what is your take on that?
Yeah, and that's, you know, that's the whole mismatch thing. I mean, there are organizations. I actually did this talk at DevOpsDays Amsterdam, and somebody said, well, I have an exec that thinks we should work 60 hours a week, 70 hours a week, and he's never going to change. So, you know, how do I avoid getting burnt out? And the answer was quit. So if you're in an organization, and I know, like, in Silicon Valley, there's a lot of startups now, not so much as 15 years ago, that really valued that 12 or 15 or 18-hour day, and that's what they expected. And if you left earlier than that, you really felt, I mean, I crawled out of the office a couple times in 2001 at 10 p.m. and felt guilty. You know, if you're in that kind of organization and you're suffering from burnout, by the way, I wasn't at that time because I loved it. If you're in that kind of organization and you're suffering from burnout, if you can't change your organization, then you have to change you. I don't think there's a way, and I could be wrong about this, I don't think there's a way that you can say that this is how I'm constructed. You know, work-life balance is incredibly important to me. I need to get off at 5 because my kids get out of school and I want to be there, or, you know, whatever it is, and that's important to me, then that's important to you, and you're not going to change. You're really not. You know, I mean, I didn't bring it up earlier, but I used to run a global engineering team, and a lot of people were like, oh my God, you made it. You know, you had the perfect job. It was the worst job I've ever had because it wasn't right for me. I didn't want 60 people reporting to me. And so, you know, with the work-life balance, that's what it comes down to. That said, my boss is bugging me all the time because I can't accrue a vacation anymore because I've built it all up. You know, but I'm not burnt out because I love what I do. You know, so it really, it's very personal, and it's about that mismatch. If you're working someplace that's an 18-hour day, and that's not what you want, ThoughtWorks is hiring.
Can I get one more round of applause for Ken?
Thank you.
Carved axes from metal left by meteoroids, weary with the stench of man.